2025 saw the release of Rian Johnson's spending Netflix money to have a fun time movie, Wake Up Dead Man. It's the fourth entry in the series, preceded by Glass Onion, which was preceded by Knives Out, which was preceded by Logan Lucky. All movies focused around cool, clever crimes where Daniel Craig puts on a funny accent. In Wake Up Dead Man, which I know, no spoilers, this isn't really about that, there's a discussion of what we call a locked room mystery. Benoit Blanc, the protagonist, references a book that describes the 3 ways to explain a locked room mystery. Mila Kunis, yep, her, these movies are great, later confronts him with the twist that he lied. She found the book he was referencing, and in it she read that there are 4 ways to do a locked room mystery. The name of that book is The Hollow Man by John Dixon Carr, and it's largely recognized as one of the best books of its type, particularly in how it pulls the story to a complete halt and includes a 20-page essay on detective stories told to you, the reader, by the protagonist, who is completely aware that he is a character in a detective novel that nonetheless is an absolute banger. But don't worry, this isn't about Benoit Blanc. It's not about Mila Kunis. It's not about John Dixon Carr or his detective Gideon Fell. This is about Harry Dubois. It's him, the Hollow Man. This is a video about Disco Elysium, one of a category of games where people can get kinda bent out of shape about spoilers. Like how I just mentioned the name Harry Dubois, you'll be fine. Nonetheless, if you don't want to be spoiled, I am going to spoil a bunch of stuff from Disco Elysium. Similarly, that's going to involve the content warning that this is a game with a lot of drugs and alcohol in it, with people dying, sexual assault is a topic of discussion, there's communism, despair, and there's existential dread, and bugs. Finally, I suppose I should deploy a sensitivity warning in that you might be a person who doesn't handle people not liking things you like very well. In which case, I warn you, I'm gonna say some of the worst things a person can seemingly say about Disco Elysium. That is, it's a good game and I liked it, but I actually think it has a lot of problems in its storytelling, and I don't find its artistic vision compelling. That is to say, I'm going to take this critically acclaimed game and engage in criticism with it, with a mind unblown by the word count. There is a non-zero chance that you don't like this kind of thing and you might want to go elsewhere. In which case, please, before you go, leave a comment complaining about something that definitely isn't in Disco Elysium so you and I can have fun arguing about it in the comments. Like, you know, the hippopotamus conspiracy or something. If you do stick around, understand that I want to talk to you about the 3 coolest things I found in Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is a 2019 video game made by Zaum, and that sentence should come with so many caveats that makes it in many ways technically not true. I'm not going to try and explain what's going on there, and instead we'll just link to the People Make Games video on the matter in the description. Talking about the circumstances around its creation, about why it got made and who was involved in making it, runs the risk of becoming a different kind of conversation. It starts being a sort of literature review and teasing out motivations and then putting those motivations in contrast with the real world choices a person made. Plus, it's honestly a kind of cop-out option, a coption, where I criticize the game, then I can point to the authors and go, well, of course they would make choices I think are bad, these people did things I also disagree with. And that's boring. Straight up. There is, I bet, a really interesting article to piece together doing that literature review. Talking to every member of the Zaum crew that wrote the game and then slowly piecing together every different source that inspired them as writers and readers, that has room to be genuinely fascinating, like Borges picking through Kafka's influences and finding his forebears. That is, however, not something I want to do, nor do I have the means or skill to do it. Instead, we return to the Roland Barthes authorial mass grave. This is an examination of my playthrough of Disco Elysium as a text. Fortunately, Barthes equips us well to discuss texts, especially in this context. While much is known of his work, The Death of the Author, which serves up the foundational idea that authors do not have unique power over interpretation of their texts they make, this interrogation of Disco Elysium owes just as much to the rest of his book, Mythologies, in which Barthes brought the tools of textual criticism to bear on topics like professional wrestling, soap commercials, and even criticism itself. In the essay Blind and Dumb Criticism, Barthes posits that there are two binaries critics regularly turn. The first is that criticism is itself impossible, because who can understand an author or a text or anything at all, really, and therefore the act of criticism is unnecessary, because the criticized work is beyond all criticizing. The other is that the critic is themselves too limited or too stupid to really, truly come to terms with the text, and therefore all they can do is give up. To this end, much of criticism of Disco Elysium seems to be more about describing what's in the text as a sort of annotated transcript. And now I guess I have to talk about text too. Wikipedia sources Disco Elysium as an example of games as art, a page that is as useful as it is embarrassing. Basically, it was pointed out in 1983, before I was alive, that video games are obviously an art form, and that curation creates meaning, and since then, nothing but absolute blithering bozos have ever leveled meaningful criticism against the claim. Anyone whose definition of art has a carve-out for video games is someone who has already conceded that their definition of art is unuseful. Therefore, while it may be elevating to point out that, Disco Elysium is a work of art, my response to that is, so is Balloon Fight. What people tend to mean when they say Disco Elysium elevates video games to the form of art is something more like, I think it's very good and I won't be embarrassed to call it a work of art, which tends to say something more about a person's position on what art is. Most people, when they use the term art, are not signifying the traits of the thing, but rather giving it a quality label that's better than just good. When you remember that mediocre, and indeed crap art exists, these definitional models lose a lot of their value. Nonetheless, these examinations of Disco Elysium strive to extol how good the game is by telling you all sorts of things that are in Disco Elysium, and inevitably, in all that I've found so far, these transcriptions of experiences wind up trying to explain what happens if you choose many different things, and then maybe what they, in this version of the story, chose. And here's where, having explained text, we need to talk about hypertexts. Hypertext is a term that's basically ungoogleable. Thanks to you existing on an internet defined by hypertext markup language, it's very hard to find the specific best sources for this, so I'm defaulting to the books I can point to, knowing full well these terms appeared before the books and were well used afterwards. So we started with Roland Barthes. Everything is a text, including things normally considered frivolous or meaningless or everyday. Next step, we have Gerard Genette, who introduced the term paratext. Paratexts are texts created to experience other texts. Genette specifically talked about the idea of book covers, blurbs, authorial art, and maps, things that were in the book, but not part of the text as a raw form. I myself consider gameplay experiences to be paratexts. The game provides the framework, and your play experience is layered onto that, in conversation with that. What you did doesn't make sense without the game. The game doesn't make sense without what you did. That's the individual experience. Then we have our third layer atop paratext, which is the idea of a text made up of multiple interlinked nodes which are non-trivial to travel between. This describes a choose-your-own-adventure book, but it's also the description Barthes used and was later coalesced by the work of Espen Aarseth in Cybertexts and George Landau in Hypertext 2.0, both released in 1997. The idea has since been used heavily in conversations around interactive fiction, where it describes a player not choosing ending A or ending B, but instead choosing both, reloading and experiencing them so that they can determine how they feel about them in conversation with one another. In this way, video games can be treated as an interactive hypertext, where there are many choices, but no choice is true, and instead the truth of the game is a sort of suspended state between all the possibilities. Things are more true or less true based on what choices are made, what interpretations the reader wants to value, but fundamentally, everything is detached from what actually happens, for lack of a better word, because the text is not any given set of events, but is instead a suspension between all these nodes as being things that could have happened. If a character is presented with 3 choices, those 3 choices are all things the hypertext considers possible for the character to choose to do. Sometimes, some people try to experience a hypertext, then engage with a true ending or narrative that makes it make sense. This is because they want to win at engaging with art, which is reasonable to want and possible to do. I'm not doing that. I played Disco Elysium once, I liked it, I got what I wanted out of it, and I don't care to become an expert. It does not compel me to play it again to see what I missed. I know what I missed. Most of 1,000,000 words. This is indeed part of my opinion about Disco Elysium and its word count. I don't think that there are 1,000,000 words in Disco Elysium as a sign of anything impressive. I'm only going to experience a tiny number of them, and the fact that there are lots of them isn't as impressive to me as to what they're being used to do and what they're about. The Bible has a huge word count, and have you read that thing? It's garbage. I instead want to bring you an account of my experiences of this collection of words, the ones I found and the ones I want to share, and the ones that I think tell you about me as a person. That is to say, I want to talk to you about my playthrough of Disco Elysium and the ways in which it made me feel and think. My one playthrough. Not a comprehensive vision of Disco Elysium, not an expert opinion. I have in some places checked some wikis to double check if I misread some text, or if there was some alternative I didn't consider, but otherwise, this is meant to be my experience and the one thread through the story that I took. Before I launch into the story of the game, I suppose I should talk about the things that tell that story. Much is made of the system of the game, with the most notable one being that it's an RPG, but it's not like Dungeons and Dragons, man. It's got all the things from role-playing games, like upgrade trees and stats, but importantly, they're called something different here. Each skill is represented by a unique name and portrait which are all drawn very differently, and they chime in Harry's dialogue to both give the player information and context about how to understand that information. This is the closest I think the game gets to doing something I can see as actually really new. It is otherwise a visual novel, which is to say a giant set of interconnected, hypertextually related words with the sinew of a game interface meant to contextualize it. But the stats system gives a lot of sinew for the game to do something I've never seen before. So hey, did you get defensive when I called Disco Elysium a visual novel? Why? I found some people don't like it when I call it a visual novel. I don't know why. Is it bad to be a visual novel? Is there something wrong with visual novels? Do I insult this game by pointing out that it has connections to and genre conventions from other video games? Do you think that visual novels are somehow inadequate to address the things this game does? And if so, how many visual novels have you played recently to form that opinion? Anyway, the system involves 24 or 25, depending on your framing, stats that each represent broad categories of what things Harry is capable of doing and how good he is at doing them. These stats all play a game of everyone is John, where they're all Harry, but Harry is, like all humans, a conflicting set of ideas, values, and preferences represented by different levels of competence and the ways they see the world. Some of them are Harry's mind drifting off to do things, dwelling on topics that may or may not matter, and some of them are basic abilities like use gun or don't drop things. Now, I think the system is really cool and good, but in my playthrough, I both didn't understand it and didn't really feel how I messed up. See, I didn't understand how this system worked when I first started playing the game. I had apparently selected Inland Empire as my key skill all those years ago when I started, and I didn't know what that meant. Whenever I opened the interface, it would start on that key skill, and there was a button in the bottom right corner that said level up. Every time I got told I had leveled up, I was like, oh, okay, I need to go there to press the level up button. This set of mistaken choices, and not realizing that I was supposed to level up each skill independently, meant that by the time I was finishing day 1, I had 12 points in Inland Empire. I suppose for those unfamiliar, I should explain what Inland Empire is. I can't really, though, because I don't remember anything it brought up. The wiki tells me it's good for dreamers and lets Harry talk to inanimate objects. That sounds cool. If I wasn't afraid of talking to people and things, I bet I could have gotten some really interesting mileage out of it. The stat system is really cool. Not one of the 3 coolest things, but really cool. It's well illustrated, all the different stats have distinct personalities and character voices, and I was able to get an impression of what they're about to do as I played, meaning that while this list was overwhelming at first, it's not something I needed to care about over much. It's not important to succeed or fail at any given one, because the many different ways they fail or succeed create some hypothetically different and interesting choices throughout the game. I got from the start to the finish mostly following paths of obvious progress, even when I botched things. I bet it's possible to finish the game without ever succeeding in a check. Except for all the ways the game killed me. Of course, that does sting a little. See, for all the vaunted choice and depth and complexity in this game, there are points where the game punishes Harry for doing fairly mundane things. Harry can die from sitting in a chair wrong. Harry can die from grabbing his tie. Harry can die from kicking a mailbox. Harry can die because a child called him a homophobic slur. Harry can die because he tried to act like a cop when talking to people who have confessed to a murder. The autosave system meant I could just pick up where I left off, but this kind of interaction had an impact on how I felt about the game. It does very much paint a form of the game where it wants me to try things because things can be interesting, and failure is interesting as well, but then get a load of this game over screen because you tried something. You idiot. Along with the stat system, there's also the thought cabinet and the equipment system. The equipment system is funny but not meaningfully interesting, certainly compared to the thought cabinet. It is Harry's talent tree. It's the things that upgrade the various different ways Harry works that unlock special dialogue options and let me, as the player, shape the kind of personality I wanted Harry to have, hypothetically. And you know what? It's a really good system. It's obviously a kind of talent or feat system, but the ideas are well written and get to use a neat second-person perspective of someone interrogating their own thoughts. Having ways to force stats I disliked downwards is a genuinely interesting part of a system of stats and checks, and making me wait for enough conversation to get the effects is pretty cool, meaning that I had to do something to distract myself only to be rewarded at the end of the conversation about house music with a reminder that my contemplations of homelessness was almost done brewing. I mean, I forgot I even started it, but, I threw a little party when it wound up happening. It's a minor system, but there's also money. It's weird how the game presented foraging for bottles as a game mechanic that was going to be necessary for the whole of the game, but it turns out I didn't have to do it after the first 2 days, and the game ends pretty much straight after that. I got to do an annoying task scrounging for loose change that was only necessary to make sure I could continue to the next day. An entire mechanic that didn't introduce anything I ever considered worth interacting with beyond its own existence. I understand that I could use that money to buy drugs, but I never wanted to buy drugs. The game told me that I wanted drugs and told me what drugs did, but it never seemed worth it. After all, if I did drugs, then the game would know that I did drugs. This is the story of the game called Disco Elysium, where you play a disaster cop called Harry Dubois, accompanied by a shockingly endearing co-worker named Kim Katsuragi. You wake up in a hotel room knowing nothing, naked, and have to get dressed and reconstruct the events of the past 42 years of your life as best you can to solve a murder case. That's your lot. Go solve some murder. A thing to learn about me is that I think talking about games is really fun. I think that it's especially fun to talk about games where there's something interesting or engaging to talk about, and even more so when I can connect the ideas in that game to something else I find interesting. To that end, games that are challenging or beloved are usually pretty exciting things to talk about because they either have some cool idea or experience that I can talk about, or they suck and I get to talk about why I think they suck, and both of those are fun ideas to me. I anticipate getting to do them with genuine and equal joy. To that end, I assign myself Disco Elysium as a little treat for my birthday. Yes, I am a thrill at parties that I don't go to. In the time I allotted myself to play Disco Elysium, I did not finish it. I didn't even come close. I didn't get through the first 2 days, finding myself eventually writing a piece as honest as I could about how that opening was making me feel. Particularly, I knew I wanted my bona fides of having played the game so I was allowed to have an opinion. In the past, when I hit the wall in a critical darling, I feel no qualms about giving up and ignoring them. In this case, I wrote down my experiences as honest as I could, and then I reflected on that. I had a year to try again, I told myself. Maybe next year, next April, I'll be able to expand that article into a video. I think the opening sucks, particularly in how the game punished me for trying things in a game that's ostensibly about exploration. I think that the setup is intriguing, but the problems the game presented me with didn't feel like things I should be able to solve, but were instead a collection of dead ends so the game could present its solutions and force me to take them. I didn't have the money to pay Gate, and even collecting everything I couldn't cover those costs, which put me in the position of siding with Evrat, who tried to humiliate me to death with a chair, or Joyce Messier, who seems a completely untrustworthy millionaire. Turns out, what I had to do was give up, and instead wait until I had no way to fix it, and then Kim would take care of it for me. Now, with the hindsight of finishing the game, these things all make sense. I understand that if I bullied Gut with my authority as a cop, I don't have to earn that much money, which means that was my mistake, to be honest. The thing that irritates me, the thing that makes me feel this opening sucks, is that I was presented with an open space and a set of puzzles, but two of them as presented were just dead ends. Time spent working on those puzzles was just wandering around playing with my fingers. Along the way, I found a bunch of things that I could try, and that were hard, and as it turns out, didn't want to try and didn't want to do, because trying them creates problems. Now, I understand this is treated as being uncompromising. That's cool, I like that. It doesn't stop the experience of playing it being an awful time suck. Everything became this slurry of missed opportunities, these confusing questions, these ideas that I just couldn't decipher. The game wanted me to do something. What did I miss? It can't be that simple, can it? Get help from the millionaire or get help from the guy whose doorman is a Nazi? That seems to me to be such an obvious false choice in a game about narrative and consequences, with all these failure state-based choices, all these things that break just because they're around me, that there's got to be something else to do. And there is. But it's nothing I do. I just wait around until someone else solves the problem. Pretty irritating. Sometimes I see people describing the game as defying power fantasies, which feels to me like an immense overstatement of the point. It's more like defying agency fantasies, where I expected to be playing the role of a detective character in this detective role-playing game, but instead, I had to get in the mindset that I was a sort of walking disaster who existed to suffer in a world that's dying and everyone hates me. Except for Kim. Except for when Kim hates me. I felt like I was constantly tripping over invisible tripwires because everyone will remember that. Now, I don't think I had a terribly non-representative experience of the game. I started playing the game, I tried to follow the clues that made sense to me, and after being shown that I would have bigger problems, more complicated problems if I did something wrong, I tried to avoid doing anything wrong. The result was a paralysis around any choices and a paranoid response to anything. I spent a not inconsiderable number of hours starting out this game running back and forth between Everard Clare and Joyce Messier in order to try and find what third path there was to advance the story without signing up to do something for these two obviously terrible people. Eventually, I figured the game wasn't going to give me those choices, and as such, I just had to go with it. When confronted with this kind of storytelling decision, especially from something with such an elevated opinion of its own grappling with complex subjects, I feel like I'm playing a game, not that I'm experiencing a story. If I'm meant to be making choices in a story to guide it, but this feeling of paranoia coupled with this dead end gives me a feeling of not playing, but instead of being coerced. This is something that can be simplified as railroading. I was better off not talking to people. I was better off not trying things. I shouldn't touch anything. I'll just mess it up. That's okay. Part of the point is the game is that Harry is not in fact the player. Rather, I am a passenger in Harriet Dubois, whose name is a spoiler. And awesome. And a possible reference to W.E. Dubois? Maybe? Nonetheless, coercive storytelling mostly distances me emotionally from the game experience. And that's fine. I don't need to be as deeply one-to-one invested with the actions of a character I'm playing. I do not, in fact, have a particular feeling of guilt about stomping on Goombas, so nor do I have a particular bother about if Harry says something racist because I don't have the option to not say something racist. At that point, it's not me choosing to be racist, it's the game going, well, now I'm going to make Harry say something racist. That first impression took the better part of a year to work through. I did make another attempt, a fresh start, knowing what I know, and that also ran into a wall. It also made me realize I was kind of giving up on the first save, and I eventually went back to it. Technically speaking, there's a fork in the timeline if you care over much about this being a reading of one experience. Nonetheless, it was all the push I needed to find the thread of the plot in the original save, and from there, the game started to happen around me. And let me tell you, this game's really fun. Like, Disco Elysium's a real good game. An enjoyable game experience with an interesting story and interesting characters, and not just in the way a lot of people just haven't shut the fuck up about it. Like, the people who have pickled their brains about the excellence of Disco Elysium are engaging with something that really exists. It's a game full of interesting characters and satisfying payouts and fun and funny dialogue choices, and it suggested I could try so many different things. Which I didn't. I think there are a bunch of NPCs I never engaged with in this game by the time I was done with it. The dialogue options present so many things that could be true and ways I could approach the world, and while I didn't pick any of them, I am confident that the game would let me pretend I was my completely fake name for the whole length of the game. Random conversations can yield ideas to put in my thought cabinet, and those ideas can be an interesting puzzle to imagine what they might do or be for. It's a good, playful experience, and puzzles seem to consistently have a bunch of different solutions. Whenever I failed at doing a thing with my skills, there's lists of things I could collect, even just information that let me try again with a bonus, rewarding me for paying attention to even more stuff. Personally, I save scummed my way through a huge part of the game. I felt no interest or compulsion in failing at everything, and the best way to advance plot and get closer to the end of the mystery seemed to be succeeding at a small number of important checks. I misidentified sometimes where it was actually important, but I don't care over much. This is a single-player video game with save and reload capabilities, and I don't want to spend 15 minutes per check changing my pants to find the right combination. If you think this makes my experience of the game wrong, then okay, you're right, you win. You are better at engaging with Disco Elysium than I am, and now you can go and tell all your friends that. Far, far away from me. Through this sequence of save scumming, I was then able to follow this thread of information. A guy got hanged outside the Whirling in Rags. He was hanged by someone else. Some Union boys claimed to have done it as punishment for him committing rape. But actually no, he didn't. He was already dead when he was hanged. He got killed by someone while he was having sex with a person they claimed he raped. Except you don't hang dead things, they're hung. In which case, he was killed, then he was hung. Clausier would appreciate that joke. The Union boys weren't all boys, and one was a girl, and by that I mean a woman. That girl arranged the cover-up and fled. That woman, was called Ruby, and she knows how to make a brain-murdering ambush radio. Ruby's brain-murdering ambush radio really hurts. Like, it really hurts. Like, it really, really hurts. Ruby can run away from the cops. Ruby also didn't do the murder. The company has a bunch of goons that kill the Union boys, and almost kill me, and almost kill Kim. That's bad. At least the last one is. Investigating the crime scene again, I find there's an island that wasn't mentioned or on the map. Over on the island, there's a murderer who did the murder because he didn't like the guy Clausier was having sex with, so he killed him. That's the murder mystery in its barest bones outline, and I don't think I'm missing any details that are fundamentally true. It's certainly true of my timeline of events as I experience them. I mentioned that I want to talk about the 3 coolest things in Disco Elysium, and at this point, I've proven I've played it. I've laid out the story in case you weren't aware of it, and I've mentioned how cool Kim is. Kim is not one of the 3 coolest things, but Kim is definitely a reason to play the game. Back when I talked about the Thought Cabinet, I described it as a talent tree with good flavor text, but I think that undersells my opinion that the second coolest thing in all of Disco Elysium is expressed by this very system, in how it presents Harry. In a dialogue-driven visual novel-style games, it is not uncommon for the player character's optimal path through numerous interactions with non-player characters to result in a character who expresses some wildly inconsistent opinions about what people should be like or how the world should be run. Especially on the indie scene, where the Western audiences, it's shockingly common how often conversations are written as if they're in a bubble, and things the player character said yesterday only matter if they said them to this person. The result is that a lot of these protagonists don't feel in a textual reading like people with an inner life whose opinions are informed by something they think, but are instead the byproduct of them making choices to say the optimal thing to get the result they want from the person they're talking to at all times. Such a character has nothing of themselves, but can hold anything you want. They are a glass box. All you ever see of them is what they are holding. Harry. Harry Dubois. Harry is capable of sustaining in his head completely contradictory, ridiculous political ideas and social notions, and they don't even touch each other when they bounce around inside him. He can proclaim to be a full-blown communist calling for capitalist blood to run in the streets, and he can espouse neoliberal caution in all things. He can imagine himself a homeless rock star super cop with no soul, and he can do all of these things at once, because the Thought Cabinet does not seem to have compatibility checks. Harry can also straight up become a racist, Like, not just a ballpark probably get around to the racism fascist. That's not so hard. He's a cop after all. This unlock lets you be a racist cop. A more racist cop than you were to start with. You can internalize the thought of, well, racism's true, right? And carry that around, and it will always be with you. It will always give you more text options that say, racism's true, right? If you want to have conversations about being a race realist around your racism-subjected coworker, this is the thing you can choose to do. You might not realize you're going to be permanently damaged this way when you first explore what unlocking means. This is a novel idea, and I don't like it in the specific case of extra double racism. I think that it's a really pathetic representation of racism, but it's a good use of the actual system of Harry. Part of the control mechanism of racism is that it's very much designed to be invisible in how it steers your behavior. The things that racism encourages you to do, it does because they're acceptable. Some social circles use the racism as not hiring black people, but in some social circles, the racism is using slurs to refer to them. Harry has no idea of what acceptable is, which means that you have to kind of have this turbo racism button to make such a thing stand out. There's racism in there, but you need to put the brightly colored racism in to make it all really pop, you see? Ah, but where's the racism, you wonder? I never clicked any racism buttons. That means I didn't do a racism, right? Look, there are two basic types of text tree in Disco Elysium. There are libraries, where the player has to exhaust everything in it to advance the plot, and there are downhill rides. The libraries often let the player retry every option, and at least as far as I could find, I could review them endlessly. I expected to click every single option at least once. The downhill rides, by contrast, only go one way, and any choice I made, I couldn't loop back and do again. I don't like that the game varies between them, and sometimes the transition from one to the other is non-obvious, but the downhill rides do something clever with unused choices. In almost all of them, I found myself wishing I had the ability to pick two choices. Ah, the yearning of hypertext. Still, in almost all of them, there's something I really didn't want to say, and that's the thing about those sections. Everything in them includes a thing that makes sense to Harry to think about saying. And Harry considers saying some really racist stuff pretty regularly. Even if the player doesn't choose to let him say it, he still wonders, is this the thing to say here? There's something I can find reliably in the glass box, something that is always there no matter what you're bouncing around inside it. Harry is a misogynist. This is a thing that's pretty much text as best I can tell. I could control how he expressed the misogyny, and whether he considers it to be a good impulse or not, but I couldn't really find a way to get it out of his head. I don't think that he likes it, and I don't think he wants to think of himself as a misogynist, but somehow his list of options always includes blaming women, and his dreams do keep coming back to her. As far as causes of his problems go, the drugs and alcohol don't seem to get nearly as many mentions as the emotional turmoil caused by her. Harry is a really beloved character in fanfiction and fan media. There's a lot of people who love this guy a lot and who can't love this disaster fail dad old man Yowie Blorbo with the love of drugs and bags and exactly the same kind of communism as mine. I think that the interpretation is completely valid since, again, he's a glass box. You can see that in Harry because if you want, you can see any damn thing you like in Harry. It's a testament to the excellent character voice, and the 25 other character voices you can impose on the guy, that it's not hard to find almost any idea you can put into Harry and find some way to express it that feels right. When you have 50 training wheels, you can take some pretty wild curves. You get that, right? Having the bits of Harry's brain labeled saying, "You got this idea because of the part of you that makes you scared," is labeling how you, the reader, should pass that text. It's like how ancient kings have names that translated into things like legitimate king and big jerk. It's how you should read this thought. Your Harry, the one you're playing, still thinks, maybe I just hate women. You can't stop Harry from having misogynist thoughts. It's one of the boundaries of the box. Even if you don't say misogynistic things to encourage that mental mode, it's still there. Which is one of those really cool ideas in the way Disco Elysium tells a story. You can only see the truths of Harry where the ideologies can't go. You only see Harry's shape by its boundaries, and the ideology is just something you put in the glass box. Something I've never seen anyone suggest in any analysis before is that the events of Disco Elysium aren't exceptional. This is a day in the office for Harry. I didn't make a racist asshole. I didn't take any alcohol or drugs. I was pretty apologetic. I kicked Measurehead in the face and I solved the murder very thoroughly. Kim liked me, and at the end of the story, my partner told me to my face that I have done this before and I will do this again. None of the choices I made matter. Nothing I chose to do steers the great unbearable vessel that is Harrier Dubois. He routinely goes to a location with a case to solve, destroys himself, drives off his cohort, sobers up, apologizes, solves the case, and promises to do better. It's why his co-workers weren't impressed or scared or bothered by when I called up and begged for help. This is boring to them. When I was done controlling Harry, he was going to repeat this pattern. This is the kind of animal he is. I think that kind of thing is really interesting in that it sort of implies for a start that Disco Elysium should be an episodic series and we should get a new one every couple of years. Sorry how that's not going to work out. The other thing it implies is that I, as a player, was just another ideology that the game let me put inside the box, and at the end I get taken out and the box keeps going. I don't have a Harry and neither do you. We just rode around in the box for a while. This pattern will continue until 22 years from now the church gets nuked and Martinet's with it, and this whole system for expressing Harry as a character is the second coolest thing in Disco Elysium. Anyway, maybe he won't die in the nuke. Maybe the Pale will get everyone. The Pale is an amazing writer's trick. I'm almost in awe of it. As a sci-fi concept, it takes some pretty incredible chutzpah to suggest that your big idea to inform and heighten the reality of your setting is nothing. It worked for the never-ending story, I suppose. The Pale is a persistent fog that presents a boundless space for new discoveries, a way to make space travel a thing you can do in a truck, while bringing its unique form of radiation and poison. Are there things in the Pale to be found? Can you get wizards tapping into the Pale? Is there something special about doing math out in the Pale? They say it breaks down in those spaces, which is a great piece of text to write on a page, and in the grounded kind of narrative that Disco Elysium wants to show, completely incomprehensible to explain. Can you take two apples and add them to one another in the dangerous parts of the Pale infinitely? Unfortunately, no, that's not what the Pale is used for in Disco Elysium. The Pale is nothing, and it's nothing in the most hopeless way possible. It feels like a pretty obvious metaphor for climate change and in a kind of post-revolutionary despair. We didn't win the revolution, capitalism won, and now history is going to end. And it's not just that metaphor though, because the story then goes on to provide explanations for what the Pale is, and where it comes from, and why it's growing. It winds up saying something I found the text left unchallenged, and then seemingly cemented with the phasmid. The Pale is, at least in my playthrough, a byproduct of people. It's too many people. It's people having too many ideas and thinking too much and feeling too much. The relentless steady spread of nothingness is a byproduct of people. The phasmid implies that humans create Pale, and the phasmid also seems to indicate there are non-human sentients in the world. We're good at noticing, too good at thinking, too permanently attuned to the world and introspection, and we're hopped up on that philosophy and thinking and caring too much, which will destroy everything. Experiencing the world the way we do is fundamentally destructive to reality. This author has an anxiety condition. Now, this idea that human minds are fundamentally destructive because we experience too much seems to me to be at odds with how brains just work, and how easy people are fooled, like by, say, false rape accusations. When someone talks about human brains having this sort of overwhelming attenuation to the universe where it's just too hard to be a human and we think too much and too hard, especially when it's something that's meant to be an external observer demonstrating expertise with the universe's truths, I find myself more embarrassed for the perspective of the author than engaging with the opinion of the character. I am keenly familiar with how easily humans are fooled. We don't see everything. We barely remember anything. Most of what we remember is reconstructed through signifiers. We learn about a tiny part of the universe around us in a narrow band of visible light. We hear barely nothing. Our senses have built-in mistakes in order to ensure we can properly identify alarm clocks and garbage bins as people, and we don't even get all the cool flavors. Harry, in this exchange, describes himself as a very sensitive instrument, and that's a beautiful line, but it's also just hogwash. Harry literally can't see the nose on his own face. Not just for Harry's chemical damage, but just for being human. One of the most categorically interesting things about humans is our brain's ability to hide from us, and Harry's mind is a shattered mess that is very specifically hiding information from him at multiple junctures. Then there's the Pale, made by our sensitive brain, and there being too many of us. The nothing is coming, nothing is here, and nothing will kill us all. I came to the conclusion at the end of Disco Elysium the only moral recourse available to the characters is to murder as many humans as possible to preserve what space remains for the Phasmids, who don't appear to be fundamentally corrosive to reality. I guess this puts me on the deserter's side, even if I think he's only notching rookie numbers. It's such a shame. The Phasmid is such a cool type of creature and such a novel explainer for the threat it presents in the story, of ways the deserter is weird and the place he's at in the world is so obtuse. I don't think the Phasmid is meant to make me don a t-shirt saying Malthus versus Revachol. I feel like the point of the Pale is to make me think about my own impending doom, but it doesn't, because my impending doom is being caused by people, with names and addresses, and the Pale is being caused by the world being too full. The Pale is a fear of crowds made into an existential threat. What metaphor is present breaks down because it compares something I do think is a problem, centralizing of wealth to allow ongoing exploitation of the environment and non-action in solving that problem, and then compares it to something I don't think is a problem, too many people. At this point I feel I have to restate that this is a really good game. I like it a lot. The fact that I can have these ideas, the fact that I can engage with these notions is, to me, interesting. This is one of the things I find the most frustrating about Disco Elysium, is that there is a survivorship bias where the people who talk about it are the people who have been baptized by it. Now that Disco Elysium has burned a hole in their brain, they can only look out at it through that hole, and the idea of looking at Disco Elysium like I have and thinking it has stupid ideas in it isn't just a criticism of a mere text, it's an insult to them. I do not find myself contemplating the vastness of hope and despair in Disco Elysium. I find myself wishing that the cool bugs were more significant and the Pale was something interesting. I find myself wishing that I got to do more of the interesting mystery solving, really. I wanted to know more about this interesting world with the Phasmid in it, where it wasn't just today, but our problem is the racists are right. The Phasmid, by the way, is the third coolest thing in Disco Elysium, which brings me around to the coolest thing about Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is a murder mystery, and probably the best murder mystery I've ever seen in a computer game. This may surprise you, given that one of the seemingly acceptable critiques of Disco Elysium is that the mystery is a bad mystery. To dig into this as best I can without just mainlining a bunch of video essays, I understand the complaint being that this is a murder mystery in which the actual murderer is never available to be accused by the reader. Ah, wait, yes, that word there, reader. This idea of fair play mystery stems probably from the writing of T.S. Eliot, when he reviewed a set of mystery books and from them deduced the fundamental character of the best English detective novels. In this overview, Eliot started a trend of digging into this, and a few essays exist that try to cook out guidelines for what makes a story good. This set of descriptive guidelines, of one person considering linked media for their common traits, has over time become a diagnostic framework, an attempt to measure what stories do a good job of or a bad job of sticking to the rules of a mystery novel. Quote, "In the ideal detective story, we should feel that we have a sporting chance to solve the mystery ourselves. If the criminal is highly abnormal or an irrational element is introduced, which offends us." In this quote, we have two things that Disco Elysium does to break these rules. Particularly, the deserter is a highly abnormal character, unlike anyone else in the suspect list, and you have no sporting chance at any point in the story until you are literally talking to the deserter to work out who actually committed the murder. Similarly, the deserter is a completely irrational element. Oh, the deserter is absolutely acting in rational ways, responding to the material concerns of his reality, but he's not related to anything else you experience in the story up to that point. This similarly means it's impossible for you to have a sporting chance to solve the mystery yourself, because the answer is never available. If this is the framework, then yes, I think Disco Elysium breaks these rules. As an English detective novel printed in the 1920s for T.S. Eliot to read, it does a bad job. As what it is, an interactive detective fiction role-playing game where you have the luxury of picking up hundreds of objects and pursuing dozens of conversational choices, it may have different needs. The task of making truly interactive mystery games has been plaguing video games from some time, with early entries like Infocom's Deadline, Suspect, and The Witness, text adventures from the early 1980s, showing just some of the basic challenges available when a player can engage with the world and the kinds of concessions a story has to make to meet the player. Particularly, one of the things that an interactive media has to deal with is the player solving the mystery early. In these text adventure games, one of the things that the game had to accommodate is a player just making an accusation early. What does the game do if a player does in fact solve the mystery themselves, and maybe does it without even having proof for it? What tools does a game have to make sure that the player understands why and how to solve it? After all, the nature of a mystery isn't just finding who done it, but typically for that explanation to be properly interesting and rewarding to understand. It isn't just getting the murderer right, it's working out what the book was trying to hide from you just enough that your finding it is rewarded. This problem is presented mostly by trying to play fair. In order to control the sequence of events, including the tribunal and the time-based threat, Disco Elysium has to make a choice about how much freedom to give me as a storytelling machine. It needs me on those rails I mentioned. Rather than giving me a set of pieces and asking me which one and how, the question of Disco Elysium is much more about presenting explanations and asking me to eliminate the impossibilities. It told me a sequence of lies, then defied me to prove which ones were incorrect. Deducing the murderer is overrated. Proving every single alternative incorrect, that's interesting. At every step, the game presents some kind of simple excuse to stop at every turn, and the only reason to pursue is my desire to erode at the boundaries of the assumed simplicity and to find the complexity within. This isn't about finding one correct motive, it's about teasing apart all the different motives and working out where they all run out, about finding that no answer I found was true because no answer I could concoct at first had the whole picture. Hey, remember back when this was about Wake Up Dead Man and the Hollow Man? Way back when I described that, the movie makes a plot point of Benoit Blanc lying about the number of locked room mysteries possible, where he only described 3 because he was hiding a 4th. The thing is, there aren't 4 ways in the book to explain a locked room mystery. The book, The Hollow Man, presents 7 methods. Does this make Wake Up Dead Man a bad movie because it's lying about source material, or worse, incorrectly representing a list? I don't think so. I think it's a great movie, and one of the things that makes it great is its willingness to discard irrelevant information. It takes a mystery idea from a book, then explores it for a movie. In a book, you have to do things one way, and in a movie, you have to do them in other ways, and that seems fancifully obvious, right? The same is true with video games. Disco Elysium has to be the kind of story where the answer cannot possibly be solved that easily. It can't be a story where anyone with the willingness to put the information together could look at the starting position and go, there. If it could, the kind of cop Harry Dubois textually is would have solved it too fast for there to be a bender. No, the problem of Disco Elysium needs to be something that's difficult, and how else could it be difficult but by being conventionally unsolvable? It all plays into the story, and I love that. To me, this mystery structure is the single coolest thing about Disco Elysium. I like Disco Elysium. I don't love it. It reminds me a lot of Avatar: The Last Airbender, where the text has such obvious qualities and is worth understanding and sharing, but it will never be my favorite of its type just because I don't like the things it chooses to do. I do think Disco Elysium is a classic video game. I think there will definitely be the kind of thing I'm going to have to read academic articles on. I think that there is a wonderful series of academic texts just waiting to be written. One about hypertext, one about survivorship bias when it comes time to discuss metatextually the kind of thing this game has done to the community of people around it. And of course, there are definitely going to be economic papers written about just what the hell is going on in Zaum. This is an interesting game with interesting ideas. Part of what makes them interesting is that they can handle being disagreed with. This is a text that merits consideration and it can be chewed on. The people who played it and don't agree with you specifically about it aren't wrong, and they aren't playing the game wrong. Finally, if someone else played this game and they didn't get what you got out of it, and your response to learning about the ways they experienced the game is to try and undermine them, then you are taking one of the most beautiful things about games, the ways they give us to understand each other, and saying, no, No, I don't want to understand you like that. Come here, I want to put an idea inside you, because I'll like it better.